Do you ever wonder what the most frequently asked question is on our Facebook group? Well, we got a couple, and they seem to be kind of seasonal. But right now, the most popular question that's been asked about a dozen times in the last couple of weeks is, how do I get started? What kind of advice do y'all have for somebody looking to get started? So for the next several episodes, I'm going to talk about how you get started in the food truck business. Welcome to the 10-Minute Food Truck Training Podcast. My name is Bill Moore. I am a food truck business coach, author of 5 food truck vending books, including Food Truck 101 and Food Truck 201. This podcast is all about helping you start and grow your food truck business.
The last thing you want to hear when you need your auto insurance most is a robot with countless irrelevant menu options. Which is why with USAA Auto Insurance, you'll get great service that is easy and reliable, all at the touch of a button. Get a quote today. Restrictions apply.
Getting started in the food truck business can be pretty easy, can be pretty difficult. Just depends on what state you live in and how serious you are about doing the work. So let's talk a little bit about what are the first things that you need to do. Well, what I want you to do right now is just to imagine yourself owning a really busy, profitable food truck. But I want you to immerse yourself in what that feels like, what that sounds like, what it smells like. Just indulge yourself. Smell the food you're cooking, whatever your food is. Listen to the people, how happy they sound every time they bite into your food. Listen to the clink of the change that falls into your cash register. Listen to the tap every time they tap that 10 or 15 or 20% tip on your POS system. Get all those sounds, get them into your mind, because it sounds pretty amazing. It can be really, really exciting. But there is an unfortunate side to our business, and it's a business fact that a lot of people have heard but don't really think it applies to them. And that fact that I'm talking about is 3 out of 5 food trucks fail within the first 3 years. Now, I'll give you a little bit of generality about that. It's typically any small business fails within the first 3 years, and it's about 60%. But food trucks, sadly, fail more frequently. We are right at the 60% failure rate, whereas most other businesses are in the upper 40s, low 50s to fail within 3 years. So knowing that fact, how do we prevent it? Well, getting into the 4th year, it is not easy, especially if you don't have formal food service experience and if you don't have business experience. It becomes extremely difficult to be successful. But the trick is, how do you beat those odds? So when someone says to me their dream is to operate a food truck, the very first question I always ask is why? Because the why becomes your motivation going into the future. You have to have a strong enough why in order for you to push through the difficult times you're going to be facing. Anybody that tells you that starting a food truck is easy and you'll be super successful, all you got to do is just show up, they're not giving you the full story. There's going to be issues. It could be permitting issues. It could be you can't find a key ingredient that you need. It could be finding help. It could be finding a legal place to set up and operate. There's all kinds of little stumbling blocks that are going to be facing you going forward. And your why, the reason you're getting into this business, is what propels you past any of those roadblocks. When I ask that question and I get answers, usually what I hear is something along the lines of, I've got a short-term problem and I got a real big reason to change and I need more money. So the reason that I hear when I ask, why do you want to operate a food truck, boils down to they've got a short-term problem, they've got a financial issue, so they've got real high motivation to make a change. But sometimes those things don't add up together. A short-term problem will eventually go away. And then what are you going to do? Having a financial need for money, we all have that. And it all varies on whether we need a little bit of money or a whole big bunch of money. A food truck may not be the answer. But for a lot of people, it seems to be the simplest business to get started in. And again, it boils down to your reason why. It's got to be a strong enough reason to help you get through any little hiccup that you have along the road. So before you jump the gun and go, okay, we can do a food truck, I want you to consider one thing, and that's your budget. Starting a business of any kind is going to have some type of cost associated with it. And I'm not talking about equipment cost. We'll talk about that in a little bit. There's a whole bunch of red tape you got to go through. A lot of the red tape has costs associated with it. There's going to be some experimentation with your food, which means you got to buy food and experiment with it. You may end up having to give some of it away to get feedback. But the idea is you got to have some type of budget. Now, I'll let you in on a little secret. You can start with next to nothing, but you got to know the rules and you got to have a plan. Otherwise, starting with next to nothing, you'll still have next to nothing 2 years down the road. All 50 states have something that'll help people that have very little money to get started, and it's a program that's called Cottage Foods. It's a low-cost program. For most states, all you got to do is go out and buy food, have the right kind of labeling on that food, and you can sell it. So very, very low cost to get started. Some states have a little tiny bit of an inspection process, maybe a license you have to purchase, but they're all very low cost. Now, if you're asking what is cottage food is food that you're able to prepare in your home kitchen. It's food that is, in most cases, shelf stable, meaning that it doesn't require any kind of refrigeration or any kind of special handling once it's cooked. So basically, once it's cooked and you cool it off, you're going to wrap it up, put your label on it, and you can start selling it. Fairly simple. Now, there are some states out there that are doing leniency on what types of foods can be cooked from a home kitchen. And they're allowing some proteins and some meal preps to be done. But it's not every state. It's not even every city in the same state. So you've got to understand what your rules and regulations are. Because you don't want to start out doing something illegal. Because if you do something illegal and you make someone sick, there's no insurance going to cover that. But all of your personal belongings could be at risk if somebody was to sue you to cover the medical bill that you created by selling food you didn't understand how to process and legally sell. But what if you do have some money saved up? Well, we can turn that into a business. But either way, you got to have a plan. So getting back on the cottage food for just 1 second, the plan is super simple. Let's say you go out and buy a box of brownie mix. You whip that up, cut it up into 9 squares, and you're going to sell each of those for, let's say, $5 a piece. That means you just now turned that $2 or $3 box of brownies into about $45. And you got to just continue to repeat that weekend after weekend. Set aside all the money you possibly can, and you can build that up towards your first tent or your first trailer or your first food truck. But if you already got a little bit of a nest egg, that puts you into the idea phase. So we got to sit down and really think about what we're going to do with this little nest egg that we've built up or we've saved up, and what type of vending are we going to do? Because you got some choices. You can get yourself a very low risk license, and in some cases all you're going to need is just a license to collect sales taxes, and you're going to pick foods that are already packaged, like snack foods, candy bars, peanuts, potato chips, drinks, prepackaged ice cream, and you're going to sell that. So the license for that would be very inexpensive, and it's a low-risk license. In some cases, you may not need any kind of license at all. That's one type of vending you can do. Or you can move up the vending ladder and get into low-risk or commercially pre-cooked foods. A low-risk food would be kettle corn. It's really, really hard to mess up kettle corn enough to make somebody sick. So it's a very low risk license. Funnel cakes is another one, super low risk. Hot dogs are even considered low risk. They typically have a different license for a hot dog cart than they do for a full-fledged food truck. The reason being, hot dogs are pre-cooked, so you can technically open them up straight out of the refrigerator and eat them. Won't make you sick. But if you want to move on up that ladder a little bit more and get into a rolling kitchen or a rolling restaurant where you're doing full prep, you're cooking raw proteins like, taco meat or hamburgers or steak or chicken, seafood, then you're going to need a higher risk license, which is going to be a little bit more expensive, a little bit more difficult to get, but you got to figure out which one of those types of vending you want to do. Now, there are several steps once you've figured out what type of vending you're going to do. We're talking about going from licensing to figuring out your menu, finding where you're going to buy your food and some other partners you need, where you're going to park, your equipment, your social media. You got to have a business plan, and then you need somebody to train and coach you. So we're going to talk about all of those things in the next podcast. Thank you so much for listening to the 10-Minute Food Truck Training Podcast. If you're finding all the information helpful to your food truck business, please become a monthly supporter of the podcast. Just hit the support button or follow the link in the description. Every little bit does help keep us going. Join our Facebook group. It's called Food Truck Training. We have a whole bunch of awesome members at all different levels, from brand new beginners to decades-old veterans. They've all got your back when it comes to helping you with your food truck. And again, thank you for listening. Come back tomorrow because I got plenty more to say when it comes to helping you and your food truck business grow.